All right, let's dive in. This deep dive is taking us right into Sunnydale, the heart of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And wow, you've really gone all out with the source material. Articles, reviews, scholarly stuff. Someone's serious about getting beneath the surface of Buffy.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? How Buffy went from this cult classic to like this cultural phenomenon. People are still dissecting it decades later.
Exactly. And you know what's really interesting? You don't just want the highlights, you want the deep cuts. The how and the why Buffy resonated so deeply and its lasting impact.
And to really appreciate that, I think we need to go back before Buffy was even a glimmer in Joss Whedon's eye. Back when supernatural shows were, well,
Yeah, kind of one-dimensional.
exactly. I mean, you had some gems, sure. The X-Files had that creepy government conspiracy vibe going on, and Highlander had its own, immortal swashbuckling thing.
But the women, though, right?
Exactly. They were either damsels in distress or these, hypersexualized warrior types. Not much room for anything in between.
So then Buffy comes along, and bam, it's 1997. Everyone's obsessed with Titanic. The Spice Girls are telling us what they want, what they really, really want. And then there's Buffy, this tiny blonde girl who's like, hold my steak, I've got homework to do and vampires to slay.
And that was so genius, right? Because she wasn't just this superhero in a vacuum. She was relatable. She's dealing with school, with friends, with parents who just didn't get it. All the stuff normal teenagers deal with, plus, the apocalypse every other week.
It's like 1 minute she's worried about the SATs,
Yeah.
and the next she's facing down a giant praying mantis demon.
Oh, yeah. Remember that episode, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date? Classic Buffy. It perfectly captured that feeling we've all had, like being pulled between the ordinary and the extraordinary.
Totally. But, it wasn't all fun and games. I mean, this girl went through some serious trauma.
Oh, absolutely. And the show didn't shy away from showing it.
Like, how many teen dramas have you seen where the main character's boyfriend turns into a soulless vampire? I mean, talk about relationship drama.
That's where Buffy really broke the mold. It showed that strength and vulnerability weren't opposites, they coexisted.
Like, she could kick ass and cry her eyes out over a lost love. It was real,
The body, man. That episode where Buffy's mom dies, forget vampires and demons, that was real horror. Just raw human grief. It punched you right in the gut.
It's amazing how they could balance that,
Yeah.
the supernatural craziness with these deeply human emotional moments. And through it all, Buffy was still calling the shots, making the tough decisions.
Right, she was the leader, the one with the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she never shied away from it.
So how'd they pull that off? This
Yeah.
blend of vulnerability and leadership? Was it the writing? Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance?
A bit of both, I think. The writing was sharp, witty, but it also had this emotional depth. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, she just nailed it.
Right. 1 minute she's this fierce warrior, the next she's a heartbroken teenager.
And the writers weren't afraid to put her through the ringer. She faced down demons, literal and metaphorical. She was constantly being tested, pushed to her limits.
And let's not forget the amazing women around her. Willow's journey from shy bookworm to powerful witch, that was groundbreaking, especially her coming out story.
Totally. And it wasn't just a very special episode thing. It was woven into her character, her relationships.
Exactly. It felt real, and it was a huge step forward for LGBTQ plus representation on TV.
For sure. Buffy wasn't afraid to tackle complex issues. And it did it in a way that was entertaining, thought-provoking, like, remember Faith?
Oh yeah, the rogue slayer.
Right. She could have easily been this one-dimensional bad girl, but they gave her this backstory, this depth. You understood her pain, her motivations. It made her a much more compelling character.
It's like Buffy created this universe where women could be anything. Heroes, villains, witches, just regular teenagers trying to survive high school.
And they were all allowed to be complex, flawed, real.
And that's something we definitely need to unpack further.
It really all comes back to Joss Whedon, the show's creator. He had this vision of a world where women weren't just the sidekicks or the love interests.
They were the heroes.
Exactly. Driving the story, making the tough choices. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It makes you wonder, like, what if Buffy hadn't come along? Would we have seen that shift towards more complex female characters in other shows?
It's tough to say for sure. TV is a tricky beast. Lots of factors at play.
But you can't deny Buffy's impact. I mean, think about shows like Charmed.
Very
Alias.
Veronica Mars.
Exactly.
Mm.
All these shows with strong women at the helm, facing danger and emotional turmoil. Would they have been the same without Buffy paving the way?
I think it's safe to say Buffy proved something important. Audiences were ready for these kinds of stories. They wanted female heroes who were just as compelling, if not more so, than their male counterparts. Remember Alias?
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah.
Sydney Bristow, she was basically Buffy in a spy thriller.
Right. Taking down bad guys, dealing with family drama, rocking a new wig every other episode. It was brilliant.
And the superhero genre. Before Buffy, I mean, you had Wonder Woman, but
Yeah, she was a little campy.
yeah, not a lot of depth there. Then comes Buffy, this badass Slayer, who also happens to be, a real person with real emotions. It's like she gave permission for characters like Supergirl and Jessica Jones to exist.
Absolutely. Buffy's legacy isn't just about seeing more women on screen. It's about the quality of their representation, showing them as fully realized individuals with strengths and flaws and desires, and yes, vulnerabilities.
And Buffy didn't shy away from showing how those vulnerabilities could be exploited, which is something we don't often see. Like, remember that episode, Innocence?
Ooh, yeah, heavy stuff.
When Buffy loses her virginity to Angel, and then, bam, he turns evil because of a gypsy curse. It was a brutal way to tackle.
For sure. Sexual consent, double standards, the way women's bodies are controlled.
It was a tough watch, but it started a conversation that needed to happen.
Definitely. And it's a testament to the show's willingness to push boundaries, even within the framework of, a supernatural teen drama.
And what's really interesting is that they explored these themes through a variety of female characters, not just Buffy. Like Willow's coming out story, it was handled with such care and authenticity.
It was, wasn't it? It showed the real struggle of coming to terms with your identity, the joy and the pain.
Exactly. And then you have Anya, who's this former vengeance demon trying to figure out human emotions. Her journey was fascinating.
Totally. It offered a different perspective on gender roles and expectations. Even a supernatural being can feel trapped by societal norms.
It's like Buffy created this whole spectrum of female experiences, each one valid and important. It wasn't about presenting this one ideal of womanhood. It was about showing all the different possibilities.
And that's what makes Buffy's impact so powerful. It wasn't just a TV show. It was a cultural moment that changed the way we think about women in media and beyond.
But let's be real, it wasn't perfect, right?
Right.
Some critics pointed out that it sometimes fell back on those traditional gender roles it was trying to subvert.
Yeah, there's that. Like, Buffy was always the one who had to sacrifice to make the hard choices. The men in her life, they often got to walk away, unscathed.
That's true. Looking back, we can see that Buffy, like any show of its time, had its blind spots.
But I think it's important to remember that it was still groundbreaking in so many ways. It's hard to imagine television today without its influence.
Absolutely. So overall, Buffy seems to have pushed things in the right direction when it comes to representing women. But did that on-screen representation actually translate into real-world change? Did Buffy actually empower women and girls in their own lives?
Now that's where things get really interesting. How do you measure the impact of a TV show on individual lives? It's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we can conduct a scientific study on that.
Right, but there's definitely anecdotal evidence. I remember reading so many articles and blog posts from women who said Buffy gave them the courage to speak their truth, to stand up for themselves, to own their power.
That's amazing. And there actually is some research that backs this up. Studies have shown that seeing strong female characters in media can have a positive impact on girls' self-esteem, body image, and even their career aspirations.
Exactly. It's not just about entertainment. It's about representation and seeing yourself reflected in the stories you consume. And that can be incredibly powerful.
Especially for young girls who are still figuring out who they are and what they're capable of.
Absolutely. When you see someone who looks like you, who shares your experiences, being portrayed as a hero, a leader, a force to be reckoned with, it can have a profound impact on your own sense of self and what you believe is possible.
It's like Buffy gave permission to women and girls to be their authentic selves, to embrace their strength and their vulnerability.
And to fight for what they believe in no matter the odds, that's a legacy that continues to inspire us today.
But it wasn't just women and girls who were impacted by Buffy. The show also had a really significant impact on the LGBTQ+ community.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with Willow's coming out story and her relationship with Tara. In the late 90s and early 2000s, seeing a lesbian relationship depicted on television with such sensitivity and authenticity, it was groundbreaking.
Remember the prom? When Willow and Tara are crowned prom queens, that was such a beautiful moment of celebration and acceptance. It meant so much to so many LGBTQ+ youth who are struggling with their own identities.
It did, didn't it? And it wasn't just about the romance. The show also dealt with the real challenges and discrimination that LGBTQ plus people face, like that episode Family, where Willow's parents reject her.
Heartbreaking. But it also highlighted the importance of chosen family, finding support and acceptance within your community. And they didn't just stop there. Remember, Andrew, he started as a villain, but he became part of the Scooby Gang.
Right, and that kind of representation mattered. Buffy was committed to showing LGBTQ plus characters and stories in a nuanced and meaningful way, and it paved the way for other shows to do the same.
So we've talked about Buffy's impact on women, on the LGBTQ plus community, on the way female characters are portrayed. But what about its influence on the supernatural genre itself? Did Buffy change the way we tell those kinds of stories?
Absolutely. Before Buffy, supernatural shows were often dark, gritty, all about the monsters and the scares.
Yes, like really serious.
Right. But Buffy brought something new to the table. Humor, heart, teenage angst.
It was still about slaying vampires, but it was also about growing up, about relationships, about dealing with the world feeling like it's out to get you.
Exactly. And it did all of that while still delivering those awesome action sequences, the witty banter, and a really intricate mythology.
It's like Buffy took the supernatural genre and made it relatable, accessible, and yeah, even fun.
And that opened the door for so many shows that came after, like Supernatural, The Vampire Diaries. They all owe a debt to Buffy.
It's amazing to think about. Buffy wasn't just a show, it was a phenomenon that changed the landscape of television. And its influence is still being felt today.
No doubt about it. Its legacy lives on in the stories we tell and the way we see the world.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, exploring the many layers of Buffy the Vampire Slayer's impact. But before we wrap things up, I have one final thought-provoking question for you to consider. Okay, so we've talked about how Buffy really blew up expectations and changed what a female hero could be. But imagine, just for a second, what if it never happened? Like Buffy never existed. What do you think TV would look like today? Would our whole idea of women in media be different?
Ooh, that's a big one. That's like rewriting the whole supernatural playbook, maybe even TV history itself. It gets complicated because Buffy was a product of its time, but it also kind of shaped the times, you know?
Yeah, so walk me through this alternate reality. No Buffy, then what?
Well, for starters, think about the shows that came right after it. Charmed, Alias, Veronica Mars. All those shows had these strong, complicated women leading the way. Would those characters have been as layered, as flawed, as human without Buffy kind of showing them how it's done?
Okay, I get that. But those shows weren't just Buffy clones, right? They had their own thing going on. So maybe they would still found their way. Just, maybe a little different.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about straight up copying, it's about changing what's possible. Buffy showed everyone that audiences were hungry for stories where women weren't just waiting for the guys to make decisions. They were out there, making their own choices, even if those choices were tough or messy or could change the whole world.
And that goes way beyond just supernatural shows, right? Think about all the shows we have now with women at the center, dramas, comedies, even reality TV. Could Buffy have had a hand in making that happen?
It's really interesting to think about. It's like this ripple effect. Buffy gave creators and studios, even viewers, the guts to embrace stories that put women front and center. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was about seeing yourself represented on screen in ways we hadn't really seen before.
Right, and let's be real, Buffy wasn't just this super serious feminist statement. It was fun, it was stylish, it had heart, you could laugh with it, cry with it, and then there were those moments where you just had to hide behind the couch because the monsters were so freaky. Without that mix of entertainment and realness, would it have had the same impact?
That's the magic formula, isn't it? It was smart, but never too serious for its own good. It could be campy, knowing when to wink at the audience, even a little silly sometimes, but then it would turn around and hit you with these deep themes: identity, grief, what it means to take responsibility.
So maybe, without Buffy, we'd still have female characters who kick butt, but they might be more one-dimensional, less relatable. Or maybe those characters would only exist in smaller shows, not the big hits.
It's all guessing, of course, but one thing's for sure, Buffy left its mark. It changed how we talk about what women can be on screen, and that definitely had an impact on how we see women in the real world.
It's wild, right? Buffy came out in the late 90s when girl power was this huge thing. Was that just a coincidence, or did the show actually help create that feeling of empowerment?
Haha, it's that chicken or the egg thing, isn't it? Did Buffy just ride the wave of something that was already happening, or did it help make that wave bigger?
I think it was probably a bit of both. The show tapped into this energy, this need for more well-rounded female characters, but then it gave that need a face, a name, a stake-wielding warrior woman.
And that warrior wasn't perfect, was she? She messed up, she doubted herself, she even lost people she loved. But she never gave up. She kept growing, kept being this flawed but incredibly strong person. That's what made her so inspiring, right?
Absolutely. It's that mix of strength and vulnerability that makes Buffy so timeless. It tells you that you don't have to be perfect to be a hero. You can be scared, you can stumble, but as long as you keep getting back up and fighting for what you believe in, you're a force to be reckoned with. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. Buffy the Vampire Slayer wasn't just a TV show. It was a cultural moment that changed how we see women in media, and maybe even in real life.
And that's why it's so much more than just vampires and demons. It's about growing up, facing your fears, and finding that inner strength, even when everything seems stacked against you. It's a story that still speaks to people of all ages, and its legacy is all about empowerment, representation, and how powerful a good story can be.
We totally slayed this deep dive. Thanks for coming along with us on this journey into the world of Buffy. And remember, this whole exploration was made just for you, based on what you wanted to dive into. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and as Buffy would say, if the apocalypse comes, beat me.